And we're live. Hello, everybody. How are you guys doing today? As you can see, I am joined by my very good friend, Olly Richards. How's it going
Hey
today,
everybody,
Olly?
going very well. Wrapped up nice and warm.
And Ollie was telling me, I'm a little jealous because Ollie was telling me that he's been very good on top of his routines and eating well and staying very healthy during this pandemic. So he's definitely getting the best benefit out of it. I'll have to take a leaf out of your book in that sense.
Yeah, well, it started off as a total train wreck, and then I was shocked into trying to improve things gradually after that. So who knows what the next 6 months will bring.
Of course, yeah. So this week is an interesting week because we have all sorts of uh, like language learning deals that we've been finding, and I especially wanted to talk to Ollie because he has his own Black Friday deals, and you guys can see I got the link right above me for you to check that out. So we'll be talking about that eventually, but the main goal today is we're gonna talk about Ollie's method and to give you guys some general language learning advice. So as you're watching this, feel free to drop your questions. We're doing this live. I'll see your questions, and I will pass them on to Ollie as we go. So, with that in mind, if there we go. Okay, I can see the people popping in now. All right. So with that in mind, I want to kind of kick things off with Ollie's method in general. So part of the thing that he's most well known for is his multiple published books that he's made about learning languages through stories. So this is an interesting concept that I hadn't really thought about before I came across Ollie's specific work on this. So Ollie, would you mind telling us what is story learning for people who aren't familiar with it?
Story learning is my cute little name for the language learning method that I have created over the last few years. And the basic gist of story learning is that it helps you learn languages quickly through stories, not through rules, textbooks, grammar, the stuff that we remember from school. And so story learning is a very natural way of learning languages. It's all based on reading stories, just like you did when you were a kid, reading stories, learning about the world that way. And by following this really natural method, it helps you put the language directly into your brain using that same process that children use to learn their native language. So that's the principle. And then I've kind of adapted that for lots of different situations. So as you mentioned, we've written a number of different language books based on stories, which have been super popular. And one of the things I wanted to do after writing these books is to actually say, okay, well, these are great for people that already speak some of the language so they can practice reading more. But what about people that actually want to learn a language through stories from the beginning? Because many people, as you know, Benny, like many people have got really mixed experience learning languages. I have so many students who will say to me, oh, I've been trying to learn Spanish for the last 35 years with no success. And it's because traditional methods work well for some people, but really don't work for a lot of people. So with story learning, what I'm trying to do is give a new, fresh way of learning that relies more on your brain's natural learning processes than the same old memorizing verbs and stuff like that.
Okay, and how is this different to how people are used to learning languages? Because, like,
Yeah,
I might have seen a story or two in school, and maybe as I've been learning a language, I might have come across a book and tried to read a story in a kind of an unorganized way. So, how are you changing all of that to make it useful over traditional methods?
yeah, good question. So most traditional methods do what? Most traditional methods are all organized around grammar. If you look in your textbook, what you'll see is a kind of big list of chapters or modules organized by grammar. So in module one, in chapter one, you'll learn how to say I am, you are, he is. And then chapter two, you'll learn, I don't know, continuous or something like that. Everything's organized by grammar. And the reason that people do that is because, to be honest, it's just the easiest way to teach. Grammar is kind of easy to teach, even though it's difficult to learn. And because it's easy to teach, that means that schools can administer tests. It means that kids have a feeling that they're learning stuff. But as we know, when you spend your time learning through rules, memorizing grammar, verb conjugations, and things like that, you might have the feeling that you're learning stuff, but can you actually speak coming out the other end? Most people can't. The Guardian did a very interesting survey a few years back and found that 8 out of 10 people, having gone through an entire school curriculum in the language, can do no more than speak and understand very basic sentences after sometimes 5-6 years of learning. So traditional methods, again, they can work for some people, but I think it takes a certain kind of learner type to enjoy working through rules and studying grammar and things like that. With story learning, that's all out the window. With story learning, your main priority is reading. And so what I do is I get you to immerse yourself in the language through stories. So from day one, you are reading stories in the language. And this works for beginners too, because what I do is I create stories that are suitable for beginners. And so by reading stories that are carefully written for beginners, you can start to get immersion in the language, and you can start to pick up stuff naturally in the language without it being force-fed. And then over time, you start to read things that are slightly more difficult. You pick up more words, and then over time, through reading stories, listening to stories, your language level goes up. You understand more and more, and because you're learning so naturally, this gives you a really strong understanding of the language. You don't have to rely on your memory, because you just know it from having been immersed in the language the whole time. So it gives you a very, very, very strong natural foundation, which is exactly the same way that native speakers learn. Native speakers don't sit there when they're kids memorizing verb tenses. They just learn them naturally by talking, by reading stories, immersing them, being immersed in the language. So story learning mimics that. So it's very different from traditional methods. It's also not right for everybody. So if you don't like the idea of learning through stories, this is definitely not for you. No way. But if you found yourself frustrated with the traditional ways of learning language, and you're looking for something that's more natural, more fun, that you can actually enjoy from the beginning, then it might be worth a try.
So one thing that I tried before I successfully learned Spanish was I picked up El Señor de los Anillos, the Lord of the Rings, and a Spanish dictionary. And I tried to, this is when I was an absolute beginner, and I didn't know any Spanish. And this was a disaster. It was obviously far too high a level for me. So how do you cater for the fact that a lot of people who are watching this might think, how can I possibly read a language when I'm just starting off? And I know I failed because I aimed too high. So how do you change the reading experience for a beginner over just general reading, like someone picking up a newspaper, for instance?
Fantastic question. I did the same thing as you, Benny. You said it was in French rather than Spanish. I remember spending half a year in Paris when I was a similar age. And I remember one day walking along the Seine, the river, and they have these big bookshops out, big bookstores on the street outside the river. I remember walking through and thinking, right, I'm going to take this French learning stuff seriously now. So I bought a novel. I can't remember what it was, which tells you how far I got with it. And I bought it, and I went and I sat down in a cafe in the 5e arrondissement, the Quartier Latin. I sat down and I started reading this book. And exactly like you said, I was looking up. The first sentence was fine, but then after that, I was just looking up every other word. And I remember the waiter came along and started giving me these dirty looks because I just sat there with a little espresso, and I was there like 3 hours later, still looking up words in the dictionary, trying to decipher what was on, and it was impossible. And the reason is that as a beginner, you are here, and the language level that you're trying to read from in a novel is here. The gap is too big. You can't understand anything. The secret for learning through any kind of immersion, whether it's speaking with people or whether it's through reading, is to learn with material that is comprehensible, something you can understand at your level. And for a complete beginner, that means you have to read stuff that's written for beginners. And so that's why with story learning, what we do is we create stories which are written for beginners. So the stories, we take we go to great pains to make sure the stories are fun and exciting, but also at a level that you can understand. And But even so, there might be some people think, well, how can I read anything when I'm a complete beginner? But as you know, Benny, in languages like Spanish and French, we actually share lots of words with English as well. So often, although it's written in Spanish, with a little bit of help, you can actually start to uncover a lot of what you're reading very simply. And so the way that we deal with this in the course is we give you the story to start reading, which again is written for beginners. And you start off by reading. So you'll read the first chapter of the story, and then you'll listen to the audio, because the audio book comes with the course. And then you'll listen to it a few times. And then you'll have a lesson where me or whoever the course tutor is will come in and we'll teach you a lesson based on what you've just read. So we'll go through it line by line, and we'll say, okay, you see that word that you just read there? Does that sound familiar at all? You see this word over here, does that remind you of an English word? So we'll literally help you kind of tease out the language from the story. So it's very, very carefully designed specifically for beginners. Because if it wasn't, then it wouldn't work. So the whole kind of method relies on that way of doing things.
Okay, so it's a very convincing premise for sure, and having looked at your books, I can see you know what you're talking about, and having written my own courses with Teach Yourself like you, there's definitely a process, a very professional process, and people who don't know, Teach Yourself is the who are like owned by John Murray. It's the same publisher that Charles Darwin used for his theory of evolution, so you know that this is the real deal here. But like obviously they signed you as the author for a reason. So like what is your experience with language learning, and why should people want to learn from you in particular?
Yeah, great question. So I've been learning languages for a long time, much like yourself, Bernie. I've spent most of the last kind of 20 years or so learning languages. But I think where my particular experience is quite unique is that I'm also a very highly qualified teacher. So I spent years and years teaching languages. I taught languages in 3 different continents. I've been a teacher trainer. I've been a teacher recruiter, written course materials for language learning for places like the Open University. I've been featured in documentaries on the BBC and things like that. So I've done a lot of stuff professionally teaching languages. So when I first started my website, my little blog back in the day, what I did was I tried to combine 2 different things, which was my experience actually learning languages out in the real world with my experience teaching it. And so everything that I've kind of created here with the books and the courses and the whole story learning method combines all of my experience teaching with learning. And I think that's why it's successful, because it's not just my idea that I dreamt up one day and tried it out. It's actually informed by many decades of research and practical experience, and that's kind of borne out by the experience that our students have on the course as well. If you look at the link that Benny has there at the top, if you scroll through and look at the various different courses we have walls and walls and walls of testimonials from students who will say things like, I've never learned in this way before. It's a completely new way of learning. And like I said before, although it's not for everybody, for people who like the idea of learning through stories and learning through this controlled immersion, it can be a really, really effective way of doing things. So I like to think it's unique.
So you say you've got walls and walls of people giving their testimonials. How many students are we talking about here?
Well, we have over 10,000 students in our various different courses, and it's increasing all the time. We're making new languages. This year we've got 5 languages on offer. We've got French, Italian, German, Spanish, and Japanese. Japanese is a new one from last year. This time next year, we hope to have. Well, in fact, this is a world exclusive you're getting here, Benny. I think we're gonna have 5 more languages next year for these courses. But for now, it's just those 5 languages. And yeah, in total, we have over 10,000 students among those in those, and many hundreds of thousands more who've bought our books and things like that. So yeah,
In
it's been
terms
going
of
down well.
Yeah, oh, definitely. That's a huge achievement for sure. And when these students have signed up, what is the kind of experience they have with story learning? Like, is it a book they read online, or how does it actually work once they've signed up?
Yeah, great question. So story learning is the method, which is learning through stories. The courses themselves are called uncovered courses. So you'll be enrolling in Spanish uncovered, French uncovered, German uncovered, Italian uncovered, Japanese uncovered. And inside the course, what you have is a complete step-by-step method. So what this is not, let's be clear about what this is not. I don't just kind of throw you in at the deep end with a book and say, hey, go and read. It's not that at all. It is a highly structured course. It's even more structured than your average textbook. So the course itself is divided up into 20 different modules, and each of those modules is one chapter of the story. So you'll be reading an entire story. By the time you get to the end of the course, you will have read an entire book in your new language, which is a really great thing to aim for and a really satisfying experience. And so in each module of the course, you will read one chapter of the story, and then you have a series of video lessons which teach you the language from the story. So you begin with the story, and then you will take lessons that teach you different things from the story. So we'll show you some of the vocabulary. We'll show you some of the grammar. We'll show you some of the cognates, which are words that you get for free because they sound the same in English. And then we have lots of exercises and activities and little tests and things like that, so that you can get that sense of progress and feel that you're learning kind of from one module to the next. So it's very, very structured. And all you have to do is follow the instructions from the beginning to the end. We make it that easy because I understand that it's really important as a language learner that you feel a sense of progress. One of the biggest reasons people give up is just like, oh, I just don't know if I'm progressing. I don't know. I can't tell if I'm getting any better or not. It's just like one more day of learning, which is why everything's very structured and we're always telling you what to do. And one of the things that I like to do in the courses as well is I come in and actually give you language coaching tips as well. So throughout the course, you'll have little masterclasses with me where I'll teach you some tricks for memorizing vocabulary, or for speaking more fluently, or for learning grammar from the stories and things like that. So you get the course itself, but you also kind of get language coaching from me as I teach you some of the tricks that I've used to learn languages. So it's a very highly structured course. It will take you between 3 to 6 months to complete, depending on how quickly you like to study. Some people zoom through it in a matter of 2 or 3 months. But it's a very, very comprehensive course that will take you right from zero, beginner, all the way up to B1 level in the language. So if you complete the course, you do everything in it, and you go at a easy pace, then you can expect to be learning for a good 6 months. So that's why the courses are usually fairly expensive. They're not cheap, these courses normally, which is why this particular offer is a really good one. You're getting a lot of bang for your buck with this.
And what is this offer for people before they check it out on the site itself?
Yeah, so these courses normally sell for between $300 and $400. So the Japanese is the most expensive course because it's much bigger. There's lots more stuff in the Japanese course. That's $400. The other courses are usually $300. But this week for Black Friday, we've cut it by 2/3, and you can enroll in any of the courses for only $97. So it's a really huge saving. We do this strictly only once a year. So when it's gone, it's gone. You have to wait another year. And that's even if we decide to do it again next year, which we might not. Who knows?
Yeah, and on top of that, if there's a time, like if someone might be thinking, oh, maybe I'll put it off to next year. The thing is, now is literally the best time to be doing a course like this, because a lot of us are stuck at home and, we can't have a very active social life, but we can make this investment in our future to potentially be able to go and visit those countries in 6 months' time, or whenever it is that the pandemic starts to clear with the vaccine. So this is the most ideal time, both because you have this excellent offer of like really knocking the price down so much, and on top of that it's a course that people can very easily use in a self-directed way in their current environment without having to leave the house, without having to go sign up to a group class with people or something like that.
So I had an email from a chap yesterday who said, Ollie, next, I'm planning to move to Spain with my family next year. And I'm wondering, like, your course looks great, but I'm thinking maybe I should just do a little survival course, because the most important thing is I want to be able to, order food, deal with people on the street. What do you recommend? And I said to him, well, look, I understand that you want to learn the basics, like be able to order a bocadillo or whatever it is you want. And that's fine. You can do that. But the thing is, right now, you've got this really unique opportunity, which means there's another 6 months or so to go for most of us before we can start traveling again. And a survival course, you can do it in a week. You don't need that much time to learn the basics. But right now, you've got a really unique opportunity to not only start a language, but actually get to a really good level. And let's be clear, if you spend the next 6 months working at a new language, you can be conversationally fluent by that time, without a doubt, if you work hard at it. And right now, we're in this situation where I don't know what it's like where you are, Benny. Here in London, where I live, we are locked down. It's total lockdown still. Restaurants are closed, cafes are closed. There's literally nothing to do. And so, there is never going to be a better time to start learning. So now is really an ideal time.
So I have several more of my own questions I want to ask you, but I also want to segue to people's questions that are coming in live. So Steve Quinn has a question. He wants to know if this would work for a 9-year-old. So I'm presuming that this is tailor-made for adults for the most part, but what age groups do you think it would actually be if somebody wanted to use it for their children?
So the main thing to say about this, it is a self-study program. So you need to be a self-directed learner. So it is primarily made for adults. Having said that, I do have a lot of high school and junior high school aged students who go through it with their parents. So what I would say is to Steve, if depending on how you learn with your child, if you like to sit down and go through it with them, and you can be very hands-on with them, then you could definitely make it work, and it will just give them that kind of immersion that native speakers have with their own language, learning through stories. But I'll be honest and say it's not designed for kids. So you may be, if you really want to do it together with your child, then by all means. But it's not intended for that. So I'd say, handle with care.
Yeah. No, it's the same for me. Whenever I recommend all of my courses to help people to speak a language, it's generally directed at adult language learners. And with that in mind, like one of the reasons that I wanted to share this this deal that Ollie's doing with everybody is because I really like how his approach complements the approach that I always recommend to so many people. Because I really focus on the speaking aspect and getting people on italki lessons and such. And I kind of completely ignore reading. That's not something I talk about at all in my courses. So it's one reason why I really love that I get to partner with Ollie on this, because I know for a lot of people it can be a more appropriate way for them, a less intimidating way, and a way that they're just better at absorbing the information by doing it through reading. So with that in mind, like how do you personally feel, Ollie, that your approach differs from other courses and other apps and things that people could potentially invest in?
Yeah, so let's talk about apps, because there's more and more apps by the day coming out. Every app claims to have the best method, and I'm quite clear that there's no such thing as the best method. It's whatever works for you, which is why I always say, look, if you don't like the idea of reading, then steer clear of this. It's not for you. Here's the thing about apps, right? Apps work generally because they are able to take big databases of language and algorithms and make a kind of game of some kind out of it. And what happens is then they take this algorithm and then they just expand it across 100,000 different languages. They're built because they can service all of these languages in using whatever kind of system that they have. That's the primary reason these apps exist. The creators of the app say, okay, how can we make something cool on an app? But I always say, just because it's an app, it doesn't mean it's necessarily a better way to learn. And just because it's an algorithm, it doesn't mean that it's going to be more effective. The starting point for learning any language always needs to be, do I feel that this is really benefiting me? And so you know, I know lots of people do use apps and they get value from it, can help them learn vocabulary here and there. But what story learning does is the complete opposite of an app-based thing, right? There's no flashing lights, there's no noises, there's no animals, there's no streaks, there's no all this other stuff. With story learning, we are using your brain's natural learning system. You're immersed in stories, you're reading the language, you're listening to the language, and you are getting bespoke lessons with real teachers and real tutors actually helping you uncover the story. So this story learning method is everything that apps are not. And so it's just based on that, it's whether you think that that's going to complement what the way that you like to learn or not. Benny, you mentioned speaking. I'm also a big fan of speaking. Whenever I learn new languages, I'm on italki all the time, taking speaking lessons as well. And the thing is that I think people don't often think of it this way, but speaking is also a form of immersion, because when you're speaking, you're getting tons and tons of input from your teacher. Your teacher's talking to you, they're teaching you stuff, you're learning things all the time. So speaking, if you enjoy it, is a really powerful way of learning a language. The thing is, there's only so many hours a day that you can be speaking with somebody. You've got to arrange your lesson, you've got to turn up at the right time, you've got to pay for the lessons or often. So it's not the most convenient way of doing things, which is why stories complement that approach so well, like you said, because with stories, you can be learning anywhere, on the train, in the car, in the bath. It really doesn't matter. Your time is your own. And you can, and the great thing about this method is it works for you wherever you happen to be. So it complements anything else you're doing. If you're taking evening classes, if you're taking lessons, if you're on italki all the time, even if you like using all those apps and things, what story learning is going to do is it's going to tap into a part of your brain that is not normally used by the other forms of learning. Because I don't know if this is interesting for people or not, but I've just written this whole essay about stories and how stories, if you do brain imaging scans as people read stories, all different parts of your brain light up compared to general kind of logic-based traditional learning. If you're learning through traditional fact-based methods, you've got one part of your brain which is active. But as soon as you start learning with stories, all these different parts of your brain start lighting up, and you can actually map this in brain imaging scans. And what this shows is the different parts of your brain are forming these neural connections with each other, experiences, memories, things like that. And that is why when you learn through stories, you find that words are so much easier to remember because you're just using your whole brain. You find that grammar, you learn it so much more naturally because it's not just rules, you're learning it from experiences and all these things. So yeah.
Excellent. All right, I got another question that came in this time from Jim, and he's wondering that he already has a basic understanding of German and he wants to push it up to the higher level. So would this still work for him, like given that he's not starting from absolute scratch, but he already has just a little bit?
Yeah, many of our most successful students, Jim, actually are refreshers or false beginners, depending on how you like to call it. And the reason is that when you're learning through stories, you're learning with the whole language from the start, right? I'm not there just teaching you the basic verbs. You're actually reading from the beginning. So what you find is right from day one, when you're reading that story, you're able to refresh the stuff that you already know, whilst also pushing yourself in new directions. So if you've learned a bit of German in the past in more traditional methods, then you might know a little bit of grammar, you might know a few words. What story learning is going to let you do right from the start is to see all that stuff in action. So you're going to get to read it in the story, you're going to get to listen to it being used in the audiobook. And that's going to mean that even if right at the beginning of the course you might be going over some familiar territory, it's a big course. And by the end of it, by the time you finish the entire story, you will have learned a whole bunch of new stuff whilst consolidating and refreshing the stuff you already know. So I'd say it's ideal for you. Who it's not ideal for is intermediate learners. So if you're already at an intermediate level, this is not for you. And by intermediate level, typically the best way to tell this is if you can sit down in a pub and have a conversation with somebody in the language with no trouble, you're intermediate, and this course isn't for you. But anything beneath that, then it's ideal.
And we had that question from Tasso Bosco, who's at an intermediate level. So Tasso, we've loads of other things that we can recommend for you. Just check out the fluent3months.com. We have a list of other deals that are happening this week. But with Ollie's courses, like he just said, it's definitely most ideal for people who are not quite at that intermediate level yet, who either need a refresher or who are starting off from scratch. So, with along those lines, I'm very curious. Like, how did you come up with this? How how did you invent this story learning method in the first place?
Yeah, well, it was a whole bunch of processes stuck together. I mean, my very first experience with stories was quite a crazy one. I almost died, actually. And I was traveling through Argentina a long time ago, and this was when I was learning Spanish, and my Spanish was really not very good. And I was traveling in Argentina, and I was up in this tiny little village in the mountains, a village called Irusha, up in the mountains on the border with Bolivia. And I was just traveling with some friends, and I woke up in the middle of the night. And it was super high up in the mountain, 3,000. I don't know if it's 3,000 feet or 3,000 meters. I always get them mixed up. It was super high. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't breathe, which was a really nasty experience. And I started to panic because I couldn't breathe. So I kind of jumped out of bed and then went outside and tried to move around a bit. But the breath wasn't coming back. And I was literally gasping for air. And I thought, you know what? This is it. This could actually be the end of Ollie. But luckily it wasn't, because I'm still here today. But I was so scared after the breath came back that I couldn't go back to bed. So what I did was I picked up a book that was lying around, this book in Spanish by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And I'd never read a book in Spanish before. My Spanish wasn't very good, but I was so terrified of going back to sleep that I said, right, I'm just going to sit here and read this book. And I sat and read it for like 2 or 3 hours because I was so terrified of going back to sleep. And I couldn't understand every word, but I kind of forced myself to keep going. We didn't have smartphones back then. There was no Google, there were no iPads. So I just kept reading this book. And eventually I went back to sleep. And the next day I was just walking through this little village, happy to be alive. And I found that these words were kind of popping into my head from like totally randomly, words that I didn't know the day before. And I realized that it all come from reading this book in Spanish. Even though I didn't understand everything, these words were sticking in my mind. And I realized, wow, there's something to this. So later on, I went back to Buenos Aires, where I was staying with my friends. And I realized that it wasn't just new words that I'd learned. I was actually starting to speak a lot better as well, because the language had just got a lot more natural for me. And it was a real revelation and totally changed the way that I think about language learning. And that was many years ago. But as I started actually teaching languages more, I realized that there wasn't enough material out there to help you learn through reading. This thing that worked so well for me, I needed books that were at a good level for beginners. So that's when I started writing my books in the first place. And then eventually developing this whole method out so that you can actually learn a new language from the beginning using stories. So it's lots of history in this method. I guess it's the best part of 15 years that it's taken to actually kind of come together into a course that you can take from the beginning.
So, like you said, it's been a long journey to get to this point, and I I know, like you said, hundreds of thousands of people have already gotten your published books. So, how do these courses that people can get this week, how do they differ from them just going and getting one of these books? Because you can obviously expand on that with, like you said, videos. And what other things can people expect? And like what what are the differences essentially between your
Yeah,
books
go
and
on.
these online courses?
Great question. These books, they're not for beginners. If you know the language already, if you're kind of at A2, B1 level, and you want to start reading, they're great. But if you're a beginner, you can't start reading. I mean, these are long stories here, right? So that even though they're graded readers, they're not for beginners. So the uncovered courses are for you if you want to start learning a language from the beginning, or you want to do what was it Jim said earlier,
Hmm.
and to go back and just kind of refresh some old knowledge from school or something like that. So if you want a structured program that's going to hold you by the hand and take you step by step through everything you need to learn, from beginner to intermediate level, that's what the courses do. In fact, the syllabus of the course, even though it's based on stories, within the course, there's a lot of teaching going on. You're learning in these uncovered courses. you're learning everything that you would learn in a textbook. It's just that we do it a different way around. We don't just give this stuff to you on a plate and say, hey, go and memorize this. We teach it to you in different, more mysterious ways, but everything is there, and it's a complete course, just like any other program or textbook.
So we've had more people join us since the very start. So I kind of we're about to run out of time, but I want to make sure we make it clear, like, how do these courses work? We kind of talked about this before, but for people who aren't familiar, like, what is how is the process work, and what should they expect after they sign up?
Yeah, great. So apologies to everyone who's here from the beginning. We're going to recap some old ground here. So these courses use a method that I created called story learning. And with story learning, you can learn a new language through stories, not through rules and textbooks and grammar and things like that. And with story learning, it helps you learn languages exactly the same way that native speakers do, by immersing themselves in the language at a level that you can understand. So we have 5 courses available: Spanish Uncovered, German Uncovered, Italian Uncovered, French Uncovered, and Japanese Uncovered. And these are all story learning courses that take you from complete beginner all the way through to intermediate level in the language. They're perfect for beginners. They're also perfect for people who want to kind of refresh the language, activate some old knowledge, pick it up again, and then move on to higher levels of the language. These courses are very extensive. They're all taught by real teachers. So there's no apps and algorithms here. This is all good, solid, natural teaching. And because they're such big courses, they're usually very, very expensive. They cost hundreds of dollars each. But the offer that we have available for Black Friday, using the, where are we? Over here. Benny's link there,
Yeah,
gives you a discount of up to $300 on these courses. So it's a huge saving, and it's this week only. It will expire at the end of this week. So that's what we have available.
all right. So thank you so much for joining us, Ollie. And we've addressed
Pleasure.
the main questions that people had. So again, check this link out. I just put it in the chat. And if you're watching this in a replay, I'll make sure it's in the description of the video. And also check out fluent3months.com for all of our other Black Friday deals, where we include Ollie's among other ones that we're promoting. But specifically, for like Ollie said, you can solve a lot of very important problems that, if you're starting off, you can get immersion through reading, and it's I can highly recommend it. I've really enjoyed all of Ollie's courses that I've had exposure to, and he knows what he's talking about. So thank you so much, Ollie, for joining us.
My pleasure. And just to say, guys, if you have any questions about the course, if you click through to the link above, on the sales pages themselves, we have live chat. I'm going to be there. People on my team are going to be there. So if you've got any questions at all about whether this is right for you, how it works, if you want to see samples and things like that, come over to the page, ask us in the live chat, and we'll hook you up with anything that you need in order to decide whether these are right for you. And Benny, thank you so much for the invitation, and it's great to hang out with everybody. And I look forward to seeing everybody inside the programs.
All right, check it out, everybody. And until next time, happy language learning.